Kids are hyper aware of the digital footprint that they leave behind. Their digital life is just as important as their real one. They just avoid potentially having something that could live online that could embarrass them.
From your experience and what you're seeing with young boys when you go and speak to them in schools and colleges and so forth, how do they believe they need to be growing into men?
Big frustration of mine is boys and men just pretending that they're fine. They're supposed to be powerful, be logical, be strong, earn a lot of money.
So there's a lot of it is around the appearance, how the world perceives them, not necessarily how they believe or feel about themselves.
They think that if they become these things, then life suddenly gets easier. But what really matters is how you treat yourself and how you treat other people. That is what is going to sustain you in the long term.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers, and today I have with me a man who I feel like we've been orbiting each other in the world of men's work and facilitation and conversation about masculinity and so forth for a number of years almost. Someone I've seen at a distance, and numerous people have recommended him to me to speak to. And today we're sitting down having a conversation. Today we have with us Nathaniel. How are you doing?
Yeah, I was saying offline, I'm feeling okay, genuinely okay. Gone from being good, and I was good for about a month. So, that's such a good time, amount of time. It was good for about a month, then had a wobble over the last 2 weeks. And then now I'm on the up again, I think. Unfortunately for me, I'm very affected by the weather. I don't know if you have that as well, but as soon as those clouds hit, it's just, I'm just, not as happy as I am when the sun shines out. And I'm also a summer baby, so I'm like, oh, birthday's coming. I think my body's like feeling that as well in a nice way, or anticipating it.
No, the weather here in the UK, as classic British people, we talk about the weather, but it is because it's so changing. I landed yesterday from Portugal and the sky was just grey, and we landed, and my partner also was like, it's always grey. I was like, yeah, it's always grey. We know this. Like you've been here for, she's Swedish, so she's only been here for like 15 years. I was like, but this is how it is. This is how it is. It's grey. But today I look out and there's a bit of sun creeping through the clouds, a bit more than creeping through the clouds. So I'd love to start with, what was your journey actually to kind of doing the work that you do now? Because you're quite multifaceted in the work that you do.
Yes. So I'm 34, turning 35 soon. And I say that because I'm approaching 10 years of working as a facilitator. And in the 5 years before that, I was working odd jobs, desk-based like admin roles, or a bit of project management at one point in creative in the sector. So I think my journey here as an adult, it starts in my mid-20s. And what informed that was, I think, me just being a boy, or a teenager specifically, and feeling like the way that my friends were, I wouldn't even say being themselves, but like being boys wasn't what I wanted to do. Or wasn't what felt comfortable for me, whether that was about doing certain activities, or like fighting, or just like how they treated other people that they didn't know. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind, I think. This idea of like, oh, you have to like become this thing, or I have to become this thing that I'm not, so that I can either be respected or maybe just be respected. So that was always in the back of my head. And then go college, go uni, whatever. And then in my mid-20s, I am feeling lost. I've discovered running at that point, and it's completely changed my life. I've joined Dem Crew. I'm traveling all over Europe, mainly to do these races and have a bunch of fun. But, my work isn't fulfilling in the slightest. and I'm just really desperately trying to figure my life out. And this was back when Twitter was the not what it is now, in terms of, you know, I can't speak of the ethics or politics of Jack, the founder, but I know the ethics and politics of Elon Musk, the now owner. And yeah, you know, I think basically what I'm trying to say is that I made friends online, and I made friends on Twitter, and those friends were a lot of them were other black men that were interrogating their masculinity or what masculinity meant to them. And so through that online community, I got sent an event for Consented magazine, which was started by two students at S.M.I.LE, Mike and Amit. And I'm really thankful for them, actually, because I feel like something like that probably wouldn't exist now. But their first magazine or first issue was on masculinity, and they were doing a big magazine launch and held an event there at one of the learning auditoriums at S.M.I.LE. And it was my first time going to S.M.I.LE. I didn't know what it was. I went to Brunel. I just went to uni to party. So the idea of like seeking knowledge through university was alien to me at that point. And yeah, I go to this event, and someone who's now a really good friend, Chama, he was leading a session on violence, and the writer Otomir, who I think has got their debut novel coming out soon, was doing a really impactful talk on like socialization of men. And another person called Jordan was also leading a session, a separate workshop on masculinity. I think the way I could describe that environment was, for me, I was around other men, and young men particularly, that I could be around, and I didn't just have to tolerate them. You know, I enjoyed their company. And, you know, my attitudes towards men and boys was shaped partially through, I guess, my relationship with my dad and stuff, and like thinking men are these people that hurt me, because that's what, for me, my dad did. But yeah, I was around other men, and I was like, oh, I feel safe here. And that was strange, you know, feeling safe around a group of men. I was like, oh, that's new. And that world and those workshops, and particularly, so there was one organization that was running the workshops at the time. They were called the Great Men Project. They said they needed more facilitators, particularly those that were black men, because they kept on going into schools in London, and because they're going in schools during school time, the people that tend to be able to volunteer during that time are actors. And as you can imagine, actors that live in London, not many are black or anything but white, to be honest. So they felt that the kids were struggling to connect, and the adults were struggling to connect as well. So yeah, Great Men Project, we're looking for volunteers. I did sign up to volunteer, but unfortunately that same year my friend died of suicide. And again, that just like kicked off like a big spiral for me. And I remember actually the project manager at the organization, I said what has happened. I told him what had happened because I was going to miss the training, and he was like, obviously really sorry what's happened, but please, like, we'd really think you'd benefit from just coming on the day. You don't have to take part. You can just like sit, if you just want to sit and just like be around people. So I went along, did my training, and kind of continued volunteering with them for a number of years. They now exist as Beyond Equality, but that was like the earlier days of their projects. And yeah, that started, I kind of opened up my world in the same way that running had opened up my world, and Dem Crew had opened up my world to the idea of the creative industries, and this idea of pushing your body to a place that you didn't think it could go through marathons and stuff. Doing this work was like, oh, that those thoughts I had when I was younger of, why are my friends like this, or why is this the way we're now supposed to be? I realized in doing this work I could challenge that. I could be an adult representative to challenge that for young people instead. And that whole thing of just I could be that person that younger Nathaniel needed or wanted to speak to. And yeah, it was really, really, really rewarding. I now know I'm good at it. I'm a great facilitator, and great at leading group discussions and working with people. That's what all my work is kind of centered around. And I've kind of gone on, to go from working just in masculinity to expanding to looking at relationships and sex education, and then more recently mental well-being. And ultimately, I just want young people to have another reference point. That's all it is. Because I think that with the world how it is, there's a lot of people sharing the same ideas to young men and boys, and I just want those same boys to have a different reference point. It's like power isn't only this thing that to be executed over other people. Like there's power in self as well as power in making a good decision for yourself or a healthy decision for yourself, as opposed to just showing you are physically stronger than someone, or maybe socially, through like bullying and all these sorts of things. And I just want kids to have a better reference point. And in the end, I don't mind if they, consume certain content, but they need to know that there's other stuff out there. And that's kind of where I step in and the companies and organizations I work with and for.
Got it. It's quite a almost accidental journey as you describe it. It's just like, one thing, you saw something, and I really resonate with the kind of questioning and for me, it was kind of probably my later 20s, start to question these models that we had as young men growing up in London about what we were. I think for me personally, it was a lot of seeing, like, I remember distinctly being in the 90s. I'm 41. So I remember being in the 90s and having this experience of like, I feel like the world is telling me what I am as a black man or black boy, and wanting to not be that thing. Oh, my mum probably very much also telling me, this is what the world thinks of you. Don't be that kind of thing. But actually what was left was this big void, like a void of like what I was meant to be. And it's so easy to go down the route of listening to, music. We didn't have influencers then. You just had music. you just had rap and garage music to listen to get an idea of what you should be as a young boy, young man. But I guess from me going on and what I'm really interested in is from your experience and what you're seeing with young boys when you go and speak to them in schools and colleges and so forth, is what is the reference point? What is the kind of message that they're receiving or they're interpreting as who they need to be as young men?
When I first started 10 years ago, the reference point was, I think, more sports based, in terms of because really for me the question is, who do young people look up to? And it was a lot of footballers about 10 years ago. Like those, they really, and I think that coincides with the way media was 10 years ago as well. So footballers mostly were like probably the most connected to or well-known role models for a lot of boys. Now, who do they see? A lot of kids actually love streamers. And I think they love streamers because there's this idea that you can make money from home. So it's like a comfortable thing. And I don't know whether they connect with like the streamers also performing and acting, and like there's a reason why you like watching them. It's not because they're sitting in silence, tapping away at a keyboard or on a controller. So streamers super popular. A lot of YouTubers, obviously, like, they don't mention Philly as much anymore, but I used to really love him. Same goes for Chunks. And a lot of the brands would work with those guys as well. And then like for Sidemen, all of those kind of young YouTube guys that have been in the game. Still got a lot of sports stars. And then I pause because I'm like, do I include dads? And I think there's probably an equal split of kids that have a father in their life or a dad in their life that they really look up to, as well as kids that just have a man that might be a mentor, or sometimes it's like a coach that's working with them, who provides that reference point for like what an adult person, an adult man looks like. And a little bit in music, but I think there's so many artists now that kids aren't really, they're kind of on to the next when it comes to music. I haven't really had a kid in the last few years that's been like, oh, this is my favorite music artist and this is why. Like, yeah, no. So yeah, so to think back, influencers, sports stars, YouTubers, streamers, and family members, and people working with them, like I guess at schools and stuff, like coaches or mentors. A lot of schools have mentoring programs now.
And it's interesting because when I think of streamers, and that I show my age, I'm not as down with the streamers as most people, a lot of young people would be. But I always, my small snippets I see, there's these men who are quite flamboyant, quite outgoing, quite outspoken, quite expressive. There's this like aspect of quite a, there's a flamboyancy I see in a lot of kind of streamers and YouTubers, in the way that they express themselves, the way they go about life.
It's a silliness that I think boys and men gravitate to because they wish they could be like that. They wish they could be silly. They wish they could be funny. They wish they could maybe not take themselves as seriously. Yeah, I think kids are like hyper aware of the digital footprint that they leave behind. And that risk is so high for them. They just avoid that risk of potentially having something that could live online that could embarrass them.
Yeah. And imagine that's such it feels very real for them, right? Because all it takes is for, everything can be searched. Once something goes onto the internet, it kind of just stays there forever in some guys, right? Unless you really want to contact Google and ask them to remove it. And there's always that risk that someone finds a photo of you, your mother doing something with you when you're a kid, and like that could just spread like wildfire through a school or through a social group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's weird because I think with kids, their phones are their digital life is just as important as their real one. Because it makes me think about how many kids I work with that get in trouble for like recording stuff they really shouldn't record. And on one hand, I'm kind of thankful that they have this kind of compulsion to record stuff because, if they're doing certain things without any, I guess, for lack of a better word, evidence, then we'd be none the wiser. And yeah, I think it's just odd that they have their person as in their physical body, and then they have their phone, which is like an extension of themselves. And yeah, being 34, 41, that was not what we had at 14.
Yeah. We barely had phone. I remember being 14 years old and the phones were like the same size as my hand. Like all you could do was make a call. You might be able to send a text message and there was a limited number of characters that you had to play with. We don't have this like constant access to everything, all information, all over the world, all news, all sharing platforms, all those things.
Yeah.
And I guess from a point of view for young boys, how do they believe they need to be as men or growing into men to get what they want? Because when I've been in a few schools and done a few conversations, and one of the things that kept coming up was respect. The one thing they really want is they want to be respect. They want respect. They want to be respected. And I guess from your experience, who do they believe they need to be or how they need to act to kind of garner that respect?
Well, I think for them, it's not about them replicating someone, but it's about them living up to certain rules or following certain rules within what they would call, masculinity, and the performance of masculinity, where they know they can't be emotional. Well, like to be a man is to not show emotions. Just this morning in a session asking kids if they have told anyone in the last year, like when they had cried. Majority of them saying no. Even though majority of them had cried, majority of them not told anyone. And then we expand that out to their parents and ask them if they've seen their dad cry, if they've seen their mum cry. Like, you don't have to guess which ones they raise their hands for, overwhelmingly mums. Maybe I'm trying to think of, maybe the last 100 kids we've asked, maybe 2 have seen their dads cry. And yeah, so I think less so in terms about like who they're trying to replicate or anything, but it's more about them being like, well, I know I can't cry. I know I must be strong. I know I must figure things out or be able to not need help. And then they know something I've seen in the last 3 years, particularly, I'd say out post lockdowns, is money. Like the obsession with money has just kind of gone through the roof. Like I've had boys that have said to me, yeah, they think like 100K a month would be like a good salary. And they think people that earn like 40, 50, 60K are broke. And yeah, that's probably something that's come out a lot lately. I'd coincide with like online influences, but young people are more drawn to designer clothes in a way that I don't think millennials were. Millennials we kind of got it in late teens, but they're getting it from like 13, 14 to know that they should have these certain brands, which for me is like a complete waste of money, obviously, as well. But yeah, they just know they're supposed to be powerful. They're supposed to be logical, be strong, earn a lot of money. They know they're supposed to look a certain way. They all want to be over 6 foot. They want to have a deep voice, and it's like they think that if they become these things, then people just flock to them, or that life suddenly gets easy or easier. And it takes a while to get through to them to realize what really matters is how you treat yourself and how you treat other people. Like that is what is going to sustain you in the long term. Money, it can come and go. Physical health can even come and go. But that the narrative that you make for yourself, or the story that you tell yourself and other people tell themselves about you based off their experiences of you, like that is what matters, and that's what actually has substance. Like the reason why you love your parents, if you have a loving family home, is because of how your parents treat you and what they do for you, not just because they are your parent. And same goes for their friends. Like sometimes I've noticed that boys build their friendships very much about time together, as opposed to how they feel about each other. And sometimes you get friendship groups that are not really helpful for anyone, but they're kind of stuck because they don't know where else to go. I think they have a lot of reference points, but they know how to be a man. To be a man is to be big, is to be strong, is to be logical. It's to be smarter than it's to appear smarter than everyone. I feel like kids practice with me, like the idea of debating or showing that they know so much about something without ever having researched it. It's just about the act of knowing, or the act of appearing to know.
So a lot of it is around the appearance, right? How the world perceives them, not necessarily how they believe or feel about themselves. And obviously it's interesting because like I work predominantly with grown adult men, and this is exactly the same. And, we know through the research that come out that form the stuff around the man box that, it's this pervasive set of rules that we just kind of bleed through from childhood into adulthood, into manhood, that we just kind of believe. You were saying about lockdown and money. Why do you think is there any reason why you think that had that shift on young boys and their perception?
Yeah, because I think it was a time where, for the kids, if they did have a laptop at home, for instance, and I'm speaking from like UK kids or kids that I've worked with mostly in London, they got to see what everyone's background looks like. Like me and you on this call, I can see that you're in the room with, bookcase, and we've actually got the same plant in the back. But what I'm just trying to allude to is that we both have places to record and like be presentable, for instance, or like aesthetically pleasing on camera. And I think for kids, one, being on TikTok and Snapchat during that period, they realized, some people have a lot more space than others, and lockdown wasn't as hard for some people as it was others. And I think in those times of hardship nationally, you really see who's got those safety nets. And I think kids were hyper aware that their families were struggling, but they were struggling, while also seeing images, whether it was on TV or online, of people that were not struggling, people that had the things that you'd want in life, which was safety, comfort, if it was dressed up in designer clothing or like bigger houses, like these people probably didn't have their minds occupied in the same way that those kids did. And I guess coming out of lockdown, creative economy just explodes again, and kids are knowing that it's possible to kind of make something of yourself, but they're really focused on that end goal and not what it takes to kind of become. If they do want to be an influencer, a footballer, whatever it is, like they're not really thinking about the time to invest in themselves to do those things, while also disregarding school because school's boring and all this other stuff. So I think the things that boys focus on, and I'm sure it's similar to men, it's easier to be focused on understand what you don't have or the things that are not in your possession when you're faced with it every day. Like, I think that's why respect is such a big one for kids, because in secondary schools, if they go to a state school or academy, like chances are they are not necessarily respected by the staff members there, or they know that there's a clear hierarchy of who can essentially be rude and who cannot, and they cannot. And again, with the money and stuff, it's just a way to hold power over people and stuff as well. So I think, they get hyper focused on those things because everyone's going to be focused on what they don't have. A friend of a friend used to be a PT, and he said, I'm training really rich guys, and it's this thing of like, I want their money, they want my body. So here we find ourselves in PT classes trying to exchange these things that we can't really give to each other. Like, client can't give all their wealth, PT can't just pop off the biceps and stick them on someone else. And I guess in relationships, it's the in between that actually matters, as opposed to those different homes or endpoints.
Yeah. I had the same experience with some young boys that went into school a couple of years ago and talked to them, and they were asking me, they were like, how much money do you make? Like, what stuff do you, and it kind of threw me off initially, because I was like, oh, this is odd. Why would you care about that? And I quickly realized after being there for a few days that, especially the older kids, I think I saw this gap, like year 7 and 8, they just kind of like still kind of like in awe, like, wow, there's this guy in front of us, he's telling us about stuff. And then like year 9, there's a shift. The year 9s, there's like a big shift in the year 9s compared to the years and up to year 10s. And they were really wanting to know about money and the stuff I had and the stuff I was doing. And it was quite funny because one of the classes I was talking about was like aspiration and life. And I made a big change to it actually after I'd been there for a couple of days. And I'd started it off with some pieces for my own life, like I traveled to Rio and I saw Usain Bolt run the 100-meter final. And I started with that piece. And it's very interesting to see for me how they listened to me more. They just listened to me more once they saw I had done something that they knew about and were interested in. And when they kind of, some of them were like, so how much did you pay to fly to Rio and get the ticket? I was really intrigued. They wanted to know about all the details. Or when I told them I had a trainer collection that was like over 100 pairs, they were like, have you got this pair? And have you got this pair? And it was just very interesting that in their eyes, the more stuff I had, the more they would actually listen to me, and I was respectable. Irrespective, they didn't really want to know about the stuff that weren't interested, but it was around stuff and kind of experiences that they wanted to have that kind of seemed to garner respect in their eyes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like whatever, hook you need to get through to kids or for them to get interested, like is what it is. I used to be really hung up on this idea of if kids like respected me while I was doing my work. My red flag is someone disrespecting me. So me working in secondary school is not really the best industry for me to environment for me to work on if that's my red flag. But what the point I've come to now is that I can always be able to it's really easy for me to demonstrate to kids I care about them. Mm-hmm. And like I say, these things you're talking about, or these other people you're referencing, like you don't know if they care about you. Mm-hmm. But I'm here giving you this time that I'm never getting it back because I care. And that is why I want to have this conversation about this topic or that topic or whatever else it is. And then they're like, oh, okay, cool. So it's like, I don't know, it's something, when someone says I'm here because I care, it's like, well, for them, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. I guess I just have to, I'll be here too then, you know? And yeah, I guess anything can interest kids. I've tried impressing them, I've tried not impressing them. And at the end, I'm just like, I'm here, you're here, let's have a chat.
And how is it that you find getting through to them? Because I think there's this commonly held on this idea that like getting through to young boys, young men is really, really difficult and they're not interested in having conversations about things that are meaningful. What do you find for you that kind of works in kind of getting through to them and actually having real conversations with them?
I think I always have the benefit of the fact that I'm going into a school or a school environment and I'm not teaching a subject. So I think that from the bat means that they know this is not a lesson. And, you know, set up a room in horseshoe shape or a circle, so they know that this is not, workbooks aren't going to be pulled out or anything like that. So I say that to say like environment is really important. And they create an environment where they know this is not going to be that relationship of me above them and them below me or beneath me. And in terms of how I've got through to them is I have to use the benefits of, in some aspects, my physicality. Like everyone always thinks I'm over 6 foot, but I'm not. I'm confident I'm 5'11". And because of that, subconsciously, and being a black mixed race man, like the boys know that this is a person to give respect to. So my job is easier because, you know, of my gender and how I like present myself. Whereas if it was, you know, my girlfriend trying to do this work, for instance, she would not have the same experience that I do because the respect wouldn't be automatically given. So yeah, setting up the room in a space that lets them know this is talking time as opposed to working in that academic way. Playing lots of games and using games as a way to teach, which is something I've learned through my years working both in S.M.I.LE and Boys and with Leap Confronting Conflict, who are great at, I think, showing that play can not only be fun, but it can be a tool to get through to people. And it's always about like the debrief of the game. So it's never like playing the game and like, yeah, cool, we're done, finished now. Everyone sit down, let's have a chat about something completely different. It's about talking about the game, what came up for you, and then going from there. Something I've really enjoyed doing in my own work on something called the Grey Area Project is where I'll put different words on the screen. They might be about emotions, might be about masculinity, femininity, love, hate, and ask kids how they would show those things at different ages in their lives. So when they're 5, how did they show love? How did that change at, 13? And how is it now at 19? And then, so after having a conversation like that, it's challenging them and saying, you've gone from showing love as a child, as hugging people, kissing them, telling you love them, to being a 13, 14-year-old and not doing any of that physical stuff and not saying it either. But what you do is you'll buy someone some food or chicken and chips. And then now, as you're older at 19, you don't tell anyone. And asking them like, what actually, when you look at everything, what makes the most sense here? Does it make sense that love is this thing you do not show anyone at 19? Or that is this thing that you can only show through buying stuff? Or that is this thing that you can only show through telling people and like literally physically showing it? And then you have a nice conversation about that. And then another question that I also ask is, who represents these things for you in your life? So who represents fear? Who represents anger? Who represents love? Who represents happiness? And that's always like really rich discussions on, about 8 years ago, I got really curious about kids and their dads, because I could see that there was a big disconnect for a lot of the boys I was working with their relationships with their fathers, and them not having a place to talk about that, because that's not what school's for. School's for learning about for different subjects, and like, I guess, how to be in a certain environment. But getting kids to talk about or reveal the abandonment they might feel, the loss, the frustration, and doing that amongst their friends, and realizing their friends also feel the same way, but they've never talked about these things to each other. It's really powerful because it allows them to build like a depth of their relationships they didn't have before. And as a result, they then feel, it's like, oh wow, what happens? Child feels a bit lighter. Child then starts engaging with school differently, and then their trajectory in life can be changed because they've got a more meaningful friendship or relationship to themselves and like how they think about things as well. I think the boys that do best are the ones that have relationships where they are emotionally safe, and the school environment can either encourage that or discourage it. And I've been to a handful of schools that encourage emotional literacy in their kids, and I guess take an approach to learning which some would describe as lax, but I would describe as really thoughtful of thinking about the adult that they are then going to create. So yeah, just get kids talking about their emotions, talking about their friends, their family, and seeing what comes up and where we go from there. And yeah, I've had really rich discussions about sensitive subjects, about suicide, self-harm, homelessness, all this trauma that they're carrying and not sharing it with anyone because they are boys and because they are one day want to be men and think, oh, I'll get over it. I'll put that in a box. It will then like go away forever. And it's like, we know that's not how it works. But for me, I'm like, it's my job to help them realize that, rather than them being that friend in their 20s that's having a breakdown or whatever else it is. It's like, how can this child be given better tools to navigate their life and their friends' lives so that they can be healthier to themselves and other people?
And what I hear you say there is like creating the structure for these young boys to reveal parts of themselves, aspects of their lives, the things they've experienced in front of other young boys that they would have avoided because they would have felt shame or they would have felt alone in that. And through that revealing, they see that they're not alone and that other people have similar experiences, maybe not exactly the same experiences, but similar. And they have a level of empathy, often, I imagine, for people's experience, even if their experience is very different. And that allows them to reveal those parts that they would have locked away and they would have tried to suppress and avoid and put in a box. But it kind of almost, as you described it, allows them to be left feeling lighter, more available to more energy even within their being.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head. Absolutely that. And yeah, when it works, it's beautiful. And, got kids crying or sharing things about, relationships they've been in and all this sort of stuff, or what they really think of their parents, and sometimes we even had kids talking about their relationship to their faith and all this sort of stuff. And I realized, I'm just giving them just a space to interrogate and explore. And it doesn't mean I'm saying that I'm making kids leave their religions or anything like that. I'm just letting kids have that thought and that feeling, and then, seeing how that all feels for them, as opposed to them pretending it's not there. Because I think that's a big frustration of mine is boys and men just like pretending that they're fine. And I'm like, no one's fine. Fine is just nothing. It's not real. And yeah, again, I care about what's real for them. And I think sometimes what I've learned in my work is that, well, if I don't know if you work with anyone that's neurodivergent, for instance, but I bring up neurodivergence because there's many ways to do something. There's many ways to communicate, and not all communication is verbal, and for instance, and not all communication is written. And I think sometimes when people are doing activities or trying to get an outcome, they're thinking of an outcome coming to them in a certain way. And I think sometimes that people might have issues in relationships or friendships because they want to hear an apology or see an apology in a certain way. And when it comes out in a way that they do not understand, without realizing this is how this person apologizes or communicates, like then there's this gap in like feeling, or people are left like feeling that they've not got what they needed out of something. When I'm like, actually, we just need better tools to be able to see, oh, this is how this person's communicating. Cool. This is what I do with it. And I think boys communicate in many ways, but a lot of time it is through physicality because of how they've been socialized to express themselves. And I think that if people aren't always ready to kind of receive those physical apologies or those physical resolutions and stuff, because they want it in a way that they might be more used to instead. But I'm just here to be like, well, communication is communication, and like, what are we going to do about it, or what are we going to do with it instead, as opposed to being like, they don't understand me. It's like, well, are you trying to understand them as well?
That's a really valuable point. And I see that inside of relationships where one partner, for instance, wants to hear the thing they want to hear in the particular way they want. Like it could be praise and gratitude. They need to hear it in a particular way, but if it's being said to them in a way that they don't register, it's as if it didn't happen. The other partner could be like praising them in ways that they don't really register, and they'd be like, my partner never praises me. They don't know. They don't appreciate me. And it's almost like an education piece of seeing a wider view of how communication can be received, like in the look, in the way that someone holds you, in the way that they, might utter some words that don't necessarily register you. It's almost like that range of receiving, like in the way that a radio, it has a really wide range of the way it receives information and the waves, instead of it just being this one station, a radio that only has one station that it can receive.
Yeah.
And I know you also talk to young boys about pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Difficult topics like relationships and sex. And these are things that I think in the wider world, sex education, when I grew up, was a very basic thing. And it's so great to hear the kind of what's available now to young people. But there's also on the other side is that there's, because of the internet, the internet may sound so old, just because of the so much information that's available to them, right? There's also kind of the other side of what they start to believe through, whether it's pornography and whether it's kind of stories from other people of like what sex should be. So I guess a question that's coming to my mind is, when you're working with young men, young boys, what is the perception they have of what sex is?
So one way I like to establish this in the room or a session, in terms of what they think sex is, one is by asking them. So I say, what is sex? And then someone might give me a very kind of textbook answer. It's about like intercourse and genitalia and so and so. Then other kids might start listing different activities and all this sort of stuff. And then on the board, you can imagine what the whiteboard looks like, So, so I'll ask that, and then that gives me a general idea of kind of who's, if I'm really honest, when I'm working with older kids like 18 plus, like who's had sex, because those are the ones that don't get excited about the topic. And I also ask, who is sex for? And you get a lot of answers which are like, me. Like, who's supposed to enjoy it? And like, me, it's for me. And then someone that might be in a relationship would be like, actually, sex is for or I tend to be the person, especially when I work with younger people, like, sex is for everyone that's having the sex to enjoy it. And they're like, oh, okay, interesting, sir. And so something that, kids struggle with sometimes is this idea of, if they think of themselves as the person that's doing the acts. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, I've had arguments or disagreements or debates with boys about the type of girl they would want to be with, right? And they're like, yeah, so I couldn't be with a girl that like goes to a lot of like house parties and like, sleeps with guys at those things, whatever. Like, that's not me. And I'm like, cool. So do you go to house parties? And they're like, yeah, obviously I go to house parties. And it's that thing of, oh, have you ever slept with someone at a house party? And again, it's me speaking 18 plus kids, because on a grey area, I work with second year students and in college and sixth forms. So just so they've got that emotional maturity and like that more life experience. And it's like, oh, have you or a friend ever like had sex with someone at a house party? They're like, yeah, of course, sir. And I'm like, so you are, in your eyes, allowed to do these things, and that makes you desirable as a young man. However, for your person that you want to be with and spend time with in a romantic relationship, you're like, she cannot do those things. And I'm like, the only constant here is you and your decisions, because their decisions aren't necessarily changing, right? But you're allowed to like go in these worlds of undesirable and desirable, but you only want the person for you that's desirable, but you're not doing the things yourself to make yourself seem desirable. And then like eventually sometimes you get a kid that's really thinking, it's like, why does it matter? Why does the past matter? Like if you're in a relationship with someone now. And I'm like, yeah, you're really thinking. Like that's where we're going eventually. One day we're gonna get there. Because I don't want it to come off as like, oh, some big respectability thing. I'm just like, no, like the boys are separating themselves from the things they're doing when they're imagining their life. And I'm like, actually, your life is here, your life is now, your life is the things you already have done and what you can do going forward. The same for your potential partners. So it's not fair to you're writing girls off for doing the same things you've done, but you're also asking them not to write you off. You know, it's like big contradiction. So yeah, in terms of relationships, I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, again, through like online influences, big respectability kind of issues, and yeah, kids thinking sex is like this act that they do or they get more than anything, as opposed to being about a relationship. I always say to kids like, or young people, the relationship it can be one night, it can be 1 year, like that relationships can still have effective communication, care, honesty, all these sorts of things, right? It's about your values as a person, if you're living up to those values or not. But yeah, kids, especially when you're talking about year 9s about things like sex, they're like, they just go kind of crazy. And yeah, a lot of them are unfortunately watching a lot of pornography, and that is their education. When it comes to relationships, their education's a bit more wider. It might be at home, might be through some of their friends, might be in relationships, as well as like TV and media. And, you know, one thing I always think is that, you know, there's a lot more education around consent, which is great. But when kids are in relationships, that might be the first time in their lives as teenagers where they can set the rules, and they can live by or break the rules, and they can, I guess, kind of push their boundaries and stuff. And I think it's really important that kids have not just a good understanding of consent, but a good understanding of communication, of respect, of emotional well-being, because consent is what is informed by all of those things, as opposed to just being about yes, no, maybe. It's about how you treat another person, how you treat yourself. And I think, yeah, if young people, when they're first getting into relationships, it's the first time they're on this like equal playing field. Whereas everything else before is like adults above them being understanding they're below them. I think in relationships, it's their first time kind of navigating something as what should be as an equal. Doesn't always happen, but yeah.
Yeah, as you say that, it's like the first time of their kind of co-creating an entity together with somebody else, in the way that they want that entity to be, what they want it to look like, how they want to feel. And I guess that's a real, if that's for the first time for two people, it's really informed by a lot of the existing kind of beliefs they have about themselves, their worth, their ability to speak up for themselves and so forth. And it can be both a really enlightening place, I imagine, for them, because they get to be maybe treated with value and they never experienced that before, or they get to speak up for what they want and have that perspective, maybe something they've never had before. And it gets to be a really good learning ground, but it also, I guess, is another place for those kind of beliefs and wounds to just continue to kind of play out with someone who may not be very skilled at noticing that's what's happening.
Absolutely. And unfortunately for kids, they're going to bring into a relationship the same thing that adults bring into a relationship, which is their past. And, I think, unfortunately, I had a lot of experience of, kids disclosing to me about the harm that they're experiencing in their relationship and when you dig a bit deeper, you're like, oh, this person's home environment is it's no surprise that this is what's happening in a relationship, if considering that's the home life of or past life of a child as well. And yeah, I don't know if kids always think about, I think anyone really, adults, we always think about the goods, or people always think about the goods when they're getting into something, as opposed to like how to navigate the bad. And I think with work I do with boys and stuff, and the reason why I get them to do these things that they think are hard is to help them build that resilience to navigate difficulty, because they're going to do that. They're going to need those skills for the rest of their lives. And otherwise, they can go down very, I guess, disruptive paths instead. And that's not what I want.
And I guess navigating difficulty is such an important life skill that, we're never really directly taught, whether that's difficult conversations and conflict resolution, whether that's a difficult conversation with a partner, or just, the vulnerabilities, even some form of kind of difficult situation. There's no kind of school of how to deal with the difficulty you're being, if you're in sport, being dropped from the team, or, if you're in sport and you mess up, you fuck up in some way and it really impacts the team. There's nowhere really that's teaching us directly kind of how to deal with these difficult situations or uncomfortability and difficulty which will continually occur in life, rejection and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I guess a question that always comes to me is because I hear this about men, and what I'm really hearing in this conversation is that men and boys aren't so different. The boys grow into being the men with the similar beliefs. They just have bigger bodies and they look more adult. But I guess the question is, for you, from what you're experiencing, is like, do young boys, do young men, are they wanting actual intimacy and closeness, be that with friends or partners? Is that something they're actually desiring?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they're always touching each other anyway. So if we're sitting in a circle, like someone's got their leg on someone else's leg. We've had other sessions, kids are like doing each other's hair. Whether they do that in class or like outside of our sessions is a different story. But when I work on the S.M.I.LE boys, we have a session that focuses on touch and safety, really. And, the boys will talk about certain acts, like if I think they're always surprised when us as facilitators greet each other, because we hug each other to say hello or goodbye. And the kids are like, so why are you hugging each other? That's gay. And we're like, is it? I'm like, sorry, did I hug him and now I've just like suddenly become gay because you said I am? Or like, what's the... They're like, so no, it's gay to like hug someone like that. I'm like, is it though, really? Like, we interrogate their sexualization of touch, which I think is what I think men do as well. And it gets really, really, it does get quite odd sometimes, where boys will not hesitate to, if I'm talking about hugging a girl, they're like, of course I'd hug a girl. I'm like, cool. And you'd hug your sister, and they're like, yeah, obviously. But I'm like, but you're romantically or sexually attracted to your sister, and they're like, no, of course, it's disgusting. I'm like, so you'd hug any girl, and that's okay because you're a boy and they're a girl. You'd never hug any boy because that's gay to you, but you can hug your sister because she's your sister, but you're not attracted to her. So if you're not attracted to your sister and you can hug her, shouldn't it be the same for like your friend that's a boy? And they're like, no, so it's gay. And I'm like, well, something's not going, like, something's gone wrong here, right? So I think they are seeking that intimacy, and we tell them, it's like, you slap each other's bums, you push each other all the time, you grips each other up, and like you're in each other's faces a lot, and you play fight all the time because you're allowed to do those things, but you're not allowed to hug each other. The same way that when girls hold hands, and when girls hug each other, and when girls sit in each other's laps, the whole school isn't shouting at them, you're gay, you're gay, you're gay. So I say to them, and they're like, yeah, but girls are just allowed to do that. And I'm like, exactly. Girls are allowed to like express themselves in that way without anyone batting an eyelid here in this country. Whereas for you, you are not allowed to do these things, yet as human beings, you still need these things. So what happens? You build up anger, build up resentment, you do the play fight and all that sort of stuff, but because you're also not in tune with yourself, that can go over the top sometimes, and then you have the fights. And then you probably feel better after the fight, but now you're in trouble, now mum's involved and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, we told them that human beings need touch, and denying yourself that is just denying yourself a human experience. All girls are not gay for hugging each other. All boys will not magically be gay for doing this either. And you know, that whole thing about the fear of the perception more than anything. I'm like, if you know what you are and what you like, I don't think that changes from hugging one person. You know, when boys are being homophobic in sessions and we talk to them about the experiences or plight of gay people or black gay people, I'm trying to get them to realize that, you know, because of your shared identity, i.e. your race, you're most likely going to have more in common with, you know, a gay person that's from the same ends as you than someone that maybe shares your sexuality but does not share your identity in other ways. And yeah, that's always, I think, difficult for them to get their head around. I'm like, do you really care about racism and black people or not? Because you can't just discount someone's race because of their sexuality or their gender. It's like we're either all black or none of us are. And then I think the more emotionally mature kids could be like, all right, so I see what you're saying, and the young ones be like, nah, still like, no, I refuse. And the hope is just that, again, you're encouraging the boys that are showing those behaviors and saying those things that make you think, oh, I think a gay boy would be safe with them emotionally, maybe hopefully physically, trying to really kind of big up those boys to show that this is a way that you can be that creates safety for more people than more harm.
The picture you paint of young boys is quite hopeful, I feel. You know, I think sometimes out externally in the media and so forth, you know, the media is primed to always create crisis and that everything is terrible. But the impression I get from you, and you know, you're like in it every, you know, on the daily basis, is of boys who want to be better, who want to actually be, the word isn't good that I'm looking for. They're wanting to be kind of active. They're wanting to take on new information. They're trying to be better young boys into men. Is that your lived experience as well of being in the field of like really being in schools with young boys?
Ooh, good question. I would say that those boys, and there's lots of them, they just kind of need the permission to know that that is a way that you can be. And then they start blossoming. I think the kind of traditional masculine actors and ways of being are still very much the norm. And kids that live up to that will get a certain level of, I won't call it real respect, I'll call it fearful respect. And, you know, adults in schools are no different. But I think there's more boys that want to be, for me, happy and healthy than there are boys that want to be kind of powerful and rich at any cost. And the frustrating thing is that they all have to live in the same worlds where they need the same things to thrive, which is stability, a career, and all this sort of stuff. And what social media has probably done has made people, and adults probably no different, but realize that if you are loudest, you will be heard. And unfortunately, that has meant that the kids that do want to be a bit different or true to themselves are not seen and not heard, and probably start doubting whether they should be that way then.
Yeah. Well, someone once said to me,
give the megaphone to those kids. Be like, no, you are heard. You can be heard.
I guess it's the same. I often see, you know, in the social media world is like the good role models, the good men, because they're just quietly putting out their message continually, Everyone hears the message. They're like, this is a good message. Good. No one really, we know it's good, so we don't really emotionally react to it too much. We don't even necessarily share it that much. We're just like, this is quietly good and this is nourishing in some way. Whereas the message that we dislike, we hate, we disagree with, we actually unconsciously amplify that message because we're like, this is bad, this is wrong, but it actually spreads like wildfire. And then, you know, our human beings are, you know, so programmed to pay attention to what's negative and get riled up and angry about it and then tell people the things we're angry about, instead of the things that are kind of softly, gently good for us and we feel nourished by.
Yeah, it makes me think of two things. One is about Google reviews. So if you go somewhere and you have a really bad experience, people, or myself included, will jump to be like, here's the 1 star. But, you know, I lived in London my whole life. I have way more positive experiences of just taking restaurants into account. I've been to way more good restaurants than I have been bad, but I've probably given more bad reviews than I have good ones. And on a more serious note, after something I experienced recently, I came to the trailer thought that it takes a lot of light to like lift darkness. It's like darkness weighs more. Like I was talking earlier with swimming and saying fat floats, muscle sinks. Like darkness sinks, and it takes so much light, so much positive interventions, affirmations, art, music, all these things, so much good stuff to like lift a little bit of darkness. And I think it's similar when it comes to messages of men that are really aspiring to be happy and healthy individuals and people in their community. It's like it takes a lot of those guys, or a lot of those men, myself included, I guess, to like shift the narrative from, you know, one person that has a message of harm, hate, very warped ideas of power and hard work and all these things. And it's very frustrating. I'm sure there's some psychological term relating to it, or sociological term relating to it, but yeah, I feel like it takes so much good to move the bad, and it's kind of similar with the work of men. I think it takes a lot of good men, or men that are trying to do the best for the people in their lives, all people in their lives. It takes a lot of them to shift the ideas of one person that wants to create harm or perpetuate harm.
Yeah, beautifully put. Yeah, darkness is heavy. Before we finish up, I was thinking, if there's any listeners here who are working with young men, or they are parents, for instance, or something, or a few things that you'd really love them to know and understand.
I'd love them to know and understand that environment is really important. And someone, or boys and men, are going to react to the environment or respond to the environment that they are in. And it's your job as an adult to be able to look at that and ask yourself, how are they reacting? How are they responding? And what is my role in that? It might be that you've created something, done something. It might be that you haven't done something. And where do you go from there? And wanting to go somewhere else, to a place that brings out, I won't just say the best in a person or a boy or a man, but brings out that true self. Because I think a lot of boys and a lot of men are acting in a way that they think they are supposed to act. And I think that's actually quite different to who they actually are. And it's your job as a parent and an adult working with kids to be able to create an environment that allows the individual to feel safe enough to like show themselves. And you can do that in a variety of ways, but I don't think you get it done by shutting people down or restricting people's interests, or having a constant hierarchy of behavior, right? Where adult is on top and child is below. You have to have certain areas, certain environments that allow you to be equals, or sometimes where you're taking a backseat and you're learning from them. Because then you can encourage them to be inquisitive and to be themselves and be celebrated for that.
Love it. Powerful. Thank you, man, for today's conversation. I feel I've learned a lot about boys and young men, and just listening to you speak, and the obvious, like, not just wisdom, but just experience you've had with speaking to so many of them and understanding their world, and choosing to step into their world instead of forcing them to step into yours, to listen to them with a keen ear and a curious heart, I guess, as well, to like understand them, like, what's your world like? And, understanding and curiosity without judgment, without a judgment of, they're good or bad, but just like a really pure curiosity, even when they may be meeting you with judgment, to still meet them with curiosity. And I really kind of feel that in our conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm responding to, as I said before, just what I needed when I was younger. Just someone to, I think in a broader sense, just someone to talk to. And in another sense, someone to listen to.
And the listeners are probably wondering where they can find you, how they can invite you into their organizations. Where in the world can you be tracked down?
I always say email's the best for me. And it's on my website, which is nathanielcole.co.uk. And I'm on Instagram as well, just Nathaniel A. Cole on Instagram. And you'll see me kind of talking about my work. I probably should talk about it more there, but mainly talking about swimming, DJing, and I guess a little bit of men's work or boys' work. And I'm on LinkedIn again. Just search my name and I'll come up.
Fantastic, man. Thank you for today. Thank you for this enlightening conversation. Listeners, I'm sure there's someone in your world, someone who could do with understanding, who desires to understand young men and boys better, and where they're coming from and what they're going through. So please do share this episode with somebody that you feel needs to hear it, or they need to hear it as well. And all there is to say for me is say a big thank you to Nathaniel, and to you, listener. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And I will catch you later on. Ciao, ciao.